the release and the dopamine rise and the hugging effect that you're talking about, it resonates completely. Because the ice kind of sticks to you.
There has been a cultural thing of like, shame, be strong, don't talk about it, which is very, very sad. Pushing that into the body and then years later being told, you're safe now to release it if you want. And maybe never in their lifetime they imagine like letting that vulnerability flow, reflecting on, you know, where in the body that pain is sitting and being told you don't have to just live that way. In fact, you can release it.
You know, honestly, it was amazing to see how you hold space for people. Welcome to The Search for Wellness, a podcast dedicated to discovering the path to a healthier, more fulfilling life. Join us on this heartfelt journey as we share inspiring stories, insightful conversations, and practical tips to nurture your mind, body, and spirit. All right, guys, I'd love to introduce you to an epic person who has really transformed my life.
I am your reflection.
Who is
Mashallah.
Come into my life and come into the world of BV recently. Nathan, who does the ice bath ceremonies at the studio. So Nathan, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you, with pleasure. First, I want to thank you for your service to the community with this podcast and YouTube channel. I've enjoyed following up on past episodes to the global community, but especially I really want to thank you for your service to the local community with Beyond Body. It's something precious because I've perceived each of the 3 times holding space there, that there's a special kind of trust and intimacy which is already inherent in the guests who show up. So I think you've cultivated a very healthy, safe space, and there's an energy there. Even when you're not there, we missed you, but still the energy is there. As you saw in the first ceremony, like literally some sisters backflipped into, you know, the power of trust and joy and release and celebrating the community and the power of vulnerability. So thank you. There's a really precious energy there. So keep going.
Thank you so
Above
much.
all.
Honestly, having people like you be part of that energy and be part of lifting that energy up is what matters. It's what actually brings everything together. Is that I feel like the people who get attracted to Beyond Body are also aligned in the same way, are also driven by the same purpose. And the ones who are not aligned, you will not even see them come or even know that or notice that we are even there or that we exist.
Yes.
So thank you so much for also sharing your energy with us. So tell us a little bit about...
It's a privilege to support your vision.
Thank you.
Bless. To introduce myself, yes, briefly, I am a classical conductor turned creator of orchestras and festivals in Senegal. And my creativity has always been tuned into large-scale utopian concepts of creating festivals, creating orchestras, bringing people together on a large scale. Suddenly, during COVID times, with restrictions, the restrictions actually destroyed what I built in Senegal, including a yoga studio. I was suddenly put in the position of like, okay, if we can't have large gatherings or continue having festivals or, you know, creating orchestras, etc., and my creativity and sense of creating abundance and being of service has always been attached to the drummers and the singers and the dancers and the rappers and, you know, the city. And it's just me and my body now. How am I going to remain of service, in flow state, creative, just as an individual? And I had never had to face this question before, but restrictions were kind of the blessing of just like, it's just me and my body. How am I going to continue creating? So my mother is a yoga teacher, so I grew up always connected to wellness practices, and then music being the first medicine in my life, I was called at an early age to specific African and Sufi trance musics that spoke directly to my heart, and I just had to follow into the source wherever it led me. And then linking this with my breathwork practice, observing how indigenous communities actually move their breath with these sophisticated musics to enter a trance healing state. Trance not being a mystical term, but a way of referring to limbic resonance, as you know about from ceremony. So long story short, what the COVID times inspired me to do were simply to share my own wellness practices, which I had never intended really to do in a professional sense. It was just my personal practices which emerged organically, you know, the medicines which I needed over time from what I learned from my mother, and specifically Moroccan and Sufi healing traditions with music and breath. And also, interestingly, maybe you recall in ceremony, I sing, I work with my voice. That was never a big thing before COVID time. So when I was brought to this question of just me and my body, how am I going to stay creative and of service, that's when my voice was kind of born. That's been a huge element of my own kind of technology of the self, working with, practices which are therapeutic for myself as well, singing. So it's been my own medicine since COVID time, and now in ceremonies I just kind of pay it forward, if you will. But it was never intentional, so it's been fascinating to discover and revisit my notion of where my gifts flow best or of service best, and really coming back to the body and the self, which has a whole another layer of metaphor that we think we have to outsource our healing or our wellness to saving money to fly to Peru and do ayahuasca. But learning that the breath and the ice and what we have right inside also has tremendous wisdom and healing power, and just reconnecting with what we already have.
Why ice?
You know what? I can interpret this question two ways. One, I do have a story of how I first became connected to it, which you may recall from ceremony. Does it fit to share this story in this moment?
Yeah, share it.
Okay, thanks for listening. It's not the shortest story, and I always ask for feedback in ceremony if we should leave this out at the end, and folks say, no, you can't leave this out. So I'll flow through it. Yes, as I mentioned before in ceremony, I am a child of the tropics, born in Florida, live mostly in Senegal, and it's highly illogical that I became an ice bath nerd. And so I had gone to college in Northern Europe, Holland and Germany, and actually had quite a difficult time. I learned the direct way what is seasonal affective disorder. I'd never heard of it before, but I actually struggled not having vitamin D on my retinas on the regular. It's dark by 4 p.m., but even the days aren't really bright because it's just a gray cloud of. And so my energy levels were nosediving. I had brain fog. Sleep rhythms were kind of just displaced, and locals would be like, what's your problem? Here's a Hefeweizen, here's a vodka, keep going. And there was this denial of elemental cold and seasonal shift, which really wasn't my vibe, long story short. And living happily ever back in Senegal, I received an invitation to work in Estonia for 3 months in the winter.
Okay.
Of course, this is much further north, on the Baltic Sea. Immediately my body contracted, kind of saying no thank you. Just at the thought of it, but breathe through it. The money was a bit too good to dismiss right away, and I told friends about the possibility and learned that Scandinavians actually have rather interesting traditions, and in some cases actually rituals, if you will, of having a more yin relationship to elemental cold and seasonal shift. And I knew I had this Germany PTSD thing to get over, and I'm also not one to remain aversive through my life, so I actually saw this as a supreme opportunity to face this aversion in the most elemental, powerful way versus just going to an ice bath or something. So I decided to take the gig and to trust the grace of the Estonian people to overcome my Germany PTSD and mega aversion to elemental cold. It was a theater project called Is There Life After Capitalism? And our task as theater performers was to wear business suits followed around by a film crew and do creative acts in the city of Tallinn. My colleagues in the project would go to restaurants and supermarkets and do provocative, funny things. And my ideas were continuously engaging the elements outdoors. Until the final week of the project, I was determined, I felt totally called, I was going to go into the Baltic Sea until I'm gone. And this is winter by now.
Yeah. I'm cold.
Yes, and they said, this will be brilliant material for the production. We'll have a whole medical van set up for you with, these measures and an Arctic wetsuit and a heart monitor on your wetsuit while you're out there and everything. All this protection bling, if you will. And I was like, no. I'm good. I feel called. I want to do it straight up. I don't need any protection mechanisms. They said, you're crazy. Mm-hmm. I said, yes, that's probably true. However, they let me do it. And this was one take, one shot, not knowing if it's going to be rocky or shallow or deep or whatever. It turns out it was shallow for a very long time. They used the footage of me coming back. It's on my website. So you see all the snow on the ground. You see the gray Baltic Sea, the gray sky, the ferry passing from Helsinki to Tallinn in the distance. Then at a certain point, you see a little black dot out there. You think it's a turtle or a log until you notice it's getting bigger. It's getting closer, it seems to be alive, it seems to have a head, it looks even human, it's wearing a business suit, what the fuck? That was me, it's got a briefcase too. I emerged from the sea, through the snow, past the camera, and they used the footage for the beginning of the production. And so when the film ended, I walked on stage all wet. And that's how it was integrated theatrically. There were rollerblades in my briefcase, which I then put on, and other things happened. But more importantly, the reason I share this whole story with you is that experience was absolutely transformational in terms of the degree of mental clarity and centeredness and inner warmth, euphoria. I had never experienced anything like that. And there was this medical van with the garlic tea and the ginger tea and the Jägermeister. 2 Estonian women to hug me, which is really nice. I did accept that. But for the rest, I was good. I did not need any of these kind of heat interventions. It was so inspiring, and I felt like the Germany PTSD thing was zapped in one moment.
Wow.
Literally, I'll never forget that day. And then, just to kind of close the context of ice as a medicine, a couple of years later, things were going on in my family, bringing up anxiety. And 10 years before that, my mother had guided me to medications for anxiety at the end of high school. And I had since gotten off of them. And that was not an easy thing, as most folks know. And I'd made a promise to myself that I would not go back to any such meds. So I felt called to return to ice bathing and cold therapy as a proper practice, to learn what is shadow work for the first time in my life and to do it, to treat it as an active meditation, just to sit raw and real with myself, see whatever needed to come up. No guidance, no workshops, just me and the ice. Again, it was a calling. It was intuitive. So in the end, I'm very grateful to this medicine for full spectrum, shadow work, light work, shaking out the demons, activating euphoria. And I can say one more thing to specifically answer this question, because you asked about ice, not just cold therapy. And there's a difference, because you can go to some ice bath workshops, but it's just cold liquid. There's no actual ice present. And this does have therapeutic benefits, especially in terms of like activating the dopamine. Allegedly, both cocaine and ice bath increase dopamine 2.5 times just through the cold exposure.
Wow.
So there are tremendous health benefits still possible with simply cold water. No discounting that. But there's a certain therapeutic benefit which I have not found addressed in like the global ice bath culture conversation yet.
Okay.
But my personal experience has drawn me to this, and that has something to do with the physicality of the ice on the skin, physical pressure, the hugging energy of the ice, the womb energy, if you will, versus just like cold liquid. And I can equate that to the first time I went to a men's retreat, Sacred Sons. Is my understanding actually is that all different brands of men's retreat all include this one session, which is often called like either a release circle, a grief circle, a rage circle sometimes.
Okay.
And it's a phase of the retreat where all the brothers come into circle, and my first time, and it was 36 men, and you step into the center if you need to release. You do not start talking about the divorce or whatever it might be. No words whatsoever, you just begin to release. It could be screams, tears, rage, anger, whatever. It's just energy flowing back to source. And when the brother in the center begins to have that release flowing, and there's a perception that like he's trying to get it out, but it isn't just flowing easily, the facilitator will guide the brothers to come forward, the whole circle, and to put physical pressure on the man in the center to help him release. And my first time doing that also resonated with my first time in like physical ice. And I really felt a resonance, a parallel with this notion of safe space for release, trauma release, emotional release, and also the need for like that womb, that physical pressure, that hug, if you will.
So obviously I did the ice bath ceremony with you, and that was my first time actually stepping into an ice bath. I'm a regular ice shower person. So I do have cold showers. Most of my showers, majority of my showers, I will turn it ice cold and I'll stand there. But both were very different experiences. Even though the water was cold, the release and the dopamine rise and the hugging effect that you're talking about, it resonates completely. It even makes sense now because the ice kind of sticks to you. It kind of like gets drawn to your body and sticks to you. And I even know because afterwards when I went to change, there was still ice stuck everywhere on my body. But it didn't feel cold, which was so bizarre. It almost felt like being held, being
exactly.
supported.
Bless.
And I honestly, I loved it, and you saw how much I loved it. I was really, really happy that day, and I keep encouraging everybody to try it. And I'm just like, Nathan can hold the most amazing space for you, so you have to try this. And I'm just so glad the universe brought you to me. And you spoke about shadow work. What is shadow work?
There are different ways of describing it. In the most simple terms, it can be to confront where you have not been being honest with yourself, for example, or what you've been avoiding looking at, or what maybe comes through in your subconscious when you go a little bit deep in breathwork and you feel like, oh, below the surface there's some emotions I haven't addressed, or this thing happened in my childhood and I just said I've always been fine, but maybe actually there's some releasing still to do. So it's what we've kind of turned a blind eye to kind of just keep functioning and performing and coping in the world. It's sometimes a privilege to be able to do shadow work, whether to have access to guidance or to access to safe spaces, or even just the time and the headspace to think about that versus I got 3 kids and making ends meet. So it's something which we shall not take for granted or minimize in terms of the necessity for safe space and guidance. And in the case of childhood trauma, or God forbid past sexual abuse, which has been a topic with clients here, or they may not have heard about the great book The Body Keeps Score, Bessel van der Kolk, about how if old emotional energy or trauma stays stuck in the body, it can become disease down the road.
Yeah.
And that's a huge topic here. But shadow work, I must say, it's largely more in the realm of men's work, because women have a kind of healthier, more natural instinct to circle up together, even informally, and just talk about what they might be struggling with, or some burdens, or just the vulnerable things, the things that you don't always let flow. And men tend to resist that a bit more. They think, okay, we're going to gather and just drink beer and watch football. So I love men's work in holding space for men's circle, but and maybe they've had to push down a lot of stuff more. Actually, I would not make such a judgment in that direction, because what I've learned, sadly, in TZ especially, is that in the case of women who have endured abuses of the nature of abortions, miscarriages, sexual abuse, rape, God forbid, there has been a cultural thing of shame, be strong, don't talk about it, which is very, very sad. Pushing that into the body, and then years later being told, you're safe now to release it if you want. And maybe never in their lifetime they imagine letting that vulnerability flow, reflecting on where in the body that pain is sitting, and being told you don't have to just live that way. In fact, you can release it. Just that alone has been mind-blowing to share with a sister, because of certain cultural things of be strong, deal with it, repress it, And I mean, my journey in East Africa started in TZ, and I've just been continuously humbled and inspired by how strong the women are. Wow. And it's here too.
Yeah.
Still.
But when you talk about the whole be strong, don't talk about it, but it also comes down to things like cancer, right? When I got diagnosed with cancer, I know for a fact that I got told that. I got told, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, don't share your story, don't share too much, and I was I actually had to okay, initially I didn't want to share, because I didn't know what was happening to me myself. But then when I realized what I wanted to share, and when I did overcome everything and all the knowledge that I gained, I was like, no ways, I have to share this. That is my purpose. That is why I'm here. That is why probably I got the cancer, was so that I could be the one to stand up and say, hey, no, you know what? There is another way. There is another option. You might have another choice than to go down the conventional route.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
And who knows how many sisters you inspired by speaking out. And in doing so, you also invited my favorite Senegalese proverb, where I lived most of my life, Nit ni tai garabam, the we is the medicine, we are each other's medicine.
Yeah.
So you welcomed that medicinal energy of your community and your support network by stepping into that power of vulnerability. So Heshin Masana, so much respect.
Thank you.
That's so inspiring.
And that's why I also started the sound healing, the gong baths and stuff. That was also part of the whole thing. for me.
I could feel it was really embodied for you.
Yeah.
at your sound
It
healing
was my
center.
calling for
Respect.
sure. But I feel like the ice is definitely your calling for you. Like when I see you in your element and when I see you in ceremony, I'm just blown away. I was like, wow. I honestly, it was amazing to see how you hold space for people. And I know I keep coming back to that. And the only reason I keep coming back is that I know there are many people out there who are hesitant, who are like, oof, ice, no. There's all this like stigma and fear around ice. So what would you say to somebody who is like, no thanks?
I will answer that very succinctly first, but to tag on to what you just shared, thank you. It's a joy and a privilege to hold the space. And as I have a past anxiety problem, and it's a common topic in terms of mental health in the community. So if anxiety is associated with worry about the future, and depression is associated with worry about the past, one thing that the ice absolutely is a zap into the present moment. An immediate, just like mirror of inner quiet. Just to let folks know that, okay, I've been told Xanax is how you deal with anxiety. That's it. That's what the doctor said. That's what my insurance covers. They don't cover no ice bath, ceremony, woo-woo. So just also I have subjective stories about the ice, why it's special to me, but also just universally, you can see it as a zap into the present moment, which is therefore a zap away from the depression and the anxiety, just to that inner quiet of the center. And maybe folks have never had the privilege to arrive at that center, that true quiet of the mind. So that's like a very short answer, or tag on to that. But frequently encountered question, what you just asked. So what I tell folks is, I tell them respectfully, is I say, your only job is to show up, and everything in your head is my job to take care of. And that usually gets a smile right away. They're like, oh, wow. And it's beautiful. They can just I feel what happens at that moment is they just kind of shift into a more feminine, brilliant. I receive your guidance. I'll come through, see what happens. And there are some cases where it's a more precise question, like I have this health condition, or this is my mental health concern, or this is what's happened when I struggle with cold showers or whatever. So it's also very interesting to go into a specific response to that. But it's usually a much more general, that's a crazy Mzungu thing. Why should I do that?
Yeah.
Or I saw someone do it, and I need those benefits too. I want to stop these meds or this or that, but I'm just terrified of the ice because they've convinced themselves. In the same way maybe I convinced myself after those years in Holland and Germany that no, that element just no. So it's also tagging onto this idea of outside of your comfort zone is where the magic happens. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's absolutely true. So if we've convinced ourselves that we are blocked off to the ice or the cold, and understanding that if provided a safe space and a healthy container and guidance, that you can step into that, that beyond your comfort zone. There are guys who come to ceremony, they're like, my wife dragged me here. I ain't doing no ice bath. I'll do the breath work. And then after that, I'll just take pictures of her in the ice.
Yeah.
And after the breath work, the dude is like, wow, I feel totally chill. I guess I'll just go with the flow and do the ice. So it's also an invitation to understand that it's a ceremony of setting the tone, creating the safe space, checking in together, hearing each person's intention, and just allowing a possibility for that, for the medicine of the community, for the breathwork especially, to create a meaningful shift for you. So it's not like you walking off the street and get thrown in the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
So allowing the possibility for just the breathwork to create a shift or create a reconnection with the body, with the heart, decompressing all the mental, I can't do that crazy stuff, whatever. Very understandable, very normal, but just letting them connect with a more empowered sense of wow, just from breathing, I didn't fly to Peru to do ayahuasca. That was kind of psychedelic still. And I feel completely in my heart and chill after that. And you can see it in folks' faces, as you know, after the breath work. It's not the same person who just walked in the room before.
And the breath work is taking you from your parasympathetic to your sympathetic and your fight or flight. And then the ice bath is also doing the same thing for you, right? Can you walk us through what happens once you have the breath work and then once you go into the ice? Because, at the end of the day, this whole thing is just a mind game, right? You're like, it's cold, it's cold, it's cold, it's cold. It's going to be cold, yes, but if you keep telling yourself it's cold, it's going to feel even colder. Yeah.
True.
And then blowing your birthday candles out.
You remember that element.
Yeah.
Your questions are beautiful. Wow. I can walk you through like some nerdy science bits. However, like it's easily Googleable. And so I think what I can contribute maybe to the collective global ice bath conversation on that topic is more about alchemization. Well, firstly, to answer your question about the progression, what I can point out importantly is that because I also do ice baths in the context of like artisan fairs or rugby tournaments or festivals even. And these are situations where folks will just be walking around looking at crafts. This is like I mean, you were at BizBaz recently, I think. So, and if you're like buying things, seeing crafts, here, try our raw honey, here's our artisan teas, these are like our metal sculptures from like recycled bits from Zimbabwe and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden here's a dude sitting in front of an ice bathtub. Often it's like, honey, hold my beer, I gotta try this,
Yeah.
So these settings, these pop-up settings where folks have not done breath work, it's an interesting conversation because while I prefer the ceremony and while it's more of, it actually is like a safe container focused on healthy release, nervous system regulation, mental health and all of that. When I got invitations to do it in pop-up settings, I was like, I can't create that safe space. Maybe they literally are holding a beer. Who knows what's in their system, whatever, especially at a festival. So I'm like, okay, it's an interesting challenge. It's an invitation that when you haven't done breath work, you rarely experience release. You rarely kind of like access the shadows, the trauma release. What you get is more of like dopamine.
The high.
Yes, you feel just great afterwards, which is probably in the end better in that setting of like a rugby match or an artisan fair or a festival or whatever. But an important difference, because there are people say like, oh, I'm not interested in the breath work, and I just come like later when you start the ice baths. I'm like, respectfully, no. If it's your first time, please come to the beginning of the ceremony and really see, first of all, connect with the power of your breath. And because therefore, not everyone has an ice bath at home. But after breath work, a lot of folks, before the ice bath even began, a lot of folks in the closing circle after breath work, before ice bath, they share like deep stuff. They share like, whoa, I connected with this ancestor, or I received amazing relief on my herniated disc and all this stuff. I was like, well, I'm so grateful for you connecting with that, because now you know that you can take this music home. It's to be shared. Remind me, I'll send you the music, and you can do this for you all the time. You don't need to pay anyone. You don't need to fly to the Amazon. You can go deep psychedelic with 2 hours of breath work. You can connect with the ancestors and your inner child for real. So it's important to let people have that experience and value the phases of the ceremony and trust that flow. But there is also value to that wild, like, honey, hold my beer, I'm going to try this ice bath thing in a festival or in a pop-up setting. So.
But you see what you've just described is two different settings, because of the reason being is one is more to do with the emotional and one is to do with the physical body. Whereas, like for somebody, like I know that the Formula One drivers, they do an ice bath before they get into the F1 car, because they lose 3 to 4 kilos and they sweat so much. So they need to really cool their body down. But they're not doing it to release any trauma. They're not doing it for any of those reasons. They're doing it because their physical body needs it at that time. But what you're doing in a ceremony is not necessarily, yes, the physical body will get the benefits of it, but the emotional body is going to get, the energetic body is going to get the benefits of it first, because you're going to release, and then the physical will come later. And those are all like almost like added bonuses, because I think 2 days, 3 days even after doing the ice bath, I was still high. I was still on my dopamine rush. I was still feeling fantastic. I was still walking around feeling like I'm the dawn, like, hey, I just did an ice bath. Yeah, like, I don't know what you've done in your life, but I just did an ice bath.
Well, just letting you know, you walk around like that all the time. You're like full-time radiant. You didn't need the ice bath to get there.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in terms of alchemizing, in terms of some of the science which goes on, so to put it in the simplest terms, common ice bath culture is associated with amount of time in the ice. And that's the first question everybody says, how long should I be there?
Yeah.
And I'm like, guess what? It has nothing to do with time. It has everything to do with just arriving at relaxation response of your nervous system while in the ice. Your goal is to relax. And it's not abstract. I'll be guiding you breath by breath. I'm very intentional about the music. As you know, we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Because only you know the soundtrack for the tears you want to unblock, or the anger you need to release, or the euphoria you want to activate. So it's very important letting people choose their own soundtrack and guiding them breath by breath. Not to hit time, but to achieve proper relaxation response of the nervous system while engaged with the ice. And the reason is because when you focus on time, the vibe is like, it's so cold, 3 minutes, I just want to hit that, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, oh, I did it. That's the vibe when you focus on time.
Yeah.
However, and yet in doing so, you do access the physical health benefits. There are many physical health benefits and they are easy to access, super easy. And you get them even if you have that like stress response of just focusing on time. But that thing when you arrive at zero and like, I did it, if you can invite that state of relaxation from the get-go, this is how you access the beyond physical health benefits. Mm-hmm. And so while the physical benefits are automatic and accessible, and most facilitators out in the world will sit there with a stopwatch and just tell you when you hit 3 minutes versus like connecting with your breathing, guiding you, really reading what you need in the moment, like staying engaged, showing up with your heart, not just watching a stopwatch. No disrespect for other practices, but that's just what I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
And I've seen those dudes say like, oh, don't cry, be strong, you can do this. And I'm like, bro, that's not how you create a safe space.
No.
Don't tell someone that. You can re-traumatize people by telling them they're not safe to continue releasing once that's begun. That's a sacred flow. Once that opening has emerged, that's so sacred. And that's when his job is like to come with a bigger heart and to connect more and to breathe and to fully show up, not to be like, make a boundary, oh, be strong, don't do that crying, whatever. So that's a whole thing I'm very critical of. No disrespect, but yeah, I've witnessed it myself, like seeing people actually made to feel unsafe when they were beginning to release. Mm-hmm. Super uncool, for real. So long story short, it's more about embodying the practices, not just paying 5,000 euros to say, I'm like Wim Hof certified now. If you haven't like been initiated, and initiated could be referred to like had your own traumas, or have gotten humbled by life in different ways. We all get initiated in different ways, as you very well know. Instead of focusing on time, we're focusing on the single goal of relaxation response to the nervous system while on the ice. This is letting the nervous system know you're safe. This is creating an inner expansion and safety and openness to access beyond physical health benefits. Release in whatever form it may flow. Nervous system regulation happens in this moment. Dissolving of anxiety and depression. Old emotional energy, old trauma, even things from childhood can release in this moment. Mm-hmm. So approaching, people have cried before they've even stepped foot in, just connecting, reconnecting, tuning with their music, being reminded that they're safe and surrounded by love and the circle, the community, very important part of the medicine. So why I said this, getting back to the alchemization. So when you engage a stressor, yet intentionally perform a relaxation response, this is hacking the nervous system, if you will. This is rewiring the nervous system to remain centered, to avoid being triggered, to respond rather than react. And if you're able to do that while engaged with the stressor of the ice, then when you go to traffic, immigration offices, this particular ex or this particular boss or whatever, maybe these energetic centers or beings in your life, which you have normalized, every time I go there, every time I see this person, I feel stressed. That means they've either shortened their breathing, fast and slow, or even stop breathing.
Yeah.
And it may not even be conscious that they're having automatic stress responses every time they see this person or every time they go this place. So this is an opportunity to also let them know it doesn't have to be that way. That you can actually preserve those relationships that maybe have been stressful for you by knowing how to invite your nervous system to let it know that you are safe by extending the exhales before you even walk in that room, or other breathing tools to keep the center, to respond rather than react, to avoid the trigger, to avoid the panic attack, And in doing so, you're also doing a service to those loved ones. Because maybe it's like a beloved family member. Maybe it's not someone that you can kick out of your life because they always stress you. Maybe it's someone you have a karmic...
And those are the hardest ones too.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And after my first men's retreat, the first time I had lunch with my mother, she was like, wow, something is really chill. You feel different. Like, we're just like two humans here. Like, totally, it was a beautiful reflection from like my most powerful like female archetype, the matriarch of my life. I'm very close to my mother. So in that moment of learning how to engage, not learning, because that is an intellectual term, of embodying how to engage stressors, yet keep the center, use the breathing to, how should we say, not put petrol on the fire of that dynamic. So maybe, which has maybe always been the case habitually, getting triggered, shall we say. So it's actually knowing how to put the water on that historically petrol fire-based relationship.
Well, isn't that like a constant reminder? Like, it's like you'd have to constantly remind yourself to stay in that breath, to try and remind yourself to breathe. Because you see, when you're in the ice and you're doing the breathing, when you're in the ice, you're in an ice spot, so you're doing it because you're there holding the space and you're telling the person, you're guiding the person through the breath. Whereas now, if somebody who really triggers you walks in and spoils your energy at that moment, you have to now do the work on your own, where you have to now sit there and remember, okay, I need to work on my own, so I need to do the work of the breath again. I need to bring myself back into that parasympathetic state. That's
a very good question. And so this is why I reeled in my words and I said, instead of learning, I said embodying. Because when you have, like as I mentioned before, hacked the nervous system of performing, provoking, like not in an abstract sense, like actually freaking doing it, performing a relaxation response with the nervous system while engaged with the stressor of the ice. This is where the hacking happens, the rewiring happens of the nervous system. And it's very common that I receive feedback that just from having done that hacking, that rewiring, that alchemization, they're like, oh, and maybe I didn't even talk about it in ceremony. Maybe they weren't given this like potential takeaway. They've told me like, wow, I went to this place where I'm normally stressed and I just felt totally centered and calm because it's embodied versus like I need to remember to do something with my breath. So depending on the, shall we say, the layers of resistance that one has, whether it happens in one session or maybe it's a bro with a lot of armor and he needs 2 or 3 sessions to really create that alchemization and really create that kind of rewiring or hacking, if you will. So this is why I also talk about, in closing circle, to keep in touch regarding breathing tools. So there can be, it can be fully embodied, where you just like know from the get-go that very evening, you've come home to your spouse and just feel like, wow, I feel like no tense energy at all. I'm just happy to see you because like I'm just so centered and so chill. Maybe they had an argument that morning or something,
And how many ice spots, like ceremonies, would you think someone needs to do? Do you think it's something they need to continuously do, or they can just do it once and be like, okay, I'm good? Good
question. So tagging onto that last thing, this is why I also don't assume that everyone gets embodiment from one session. So this is why I say, if you would like me to send you breathing tools, like actual little YouTube guided audio things or things I can even do on a quick call. So it's not just about like everything happens in the ceremony. In many cases it is, but it's often like to work, to support the embodiment, to tune into the embodiment, to also know the breathing tools to kind of, shall we say, reconnect. For example, in the psychedelic sense with plant medicine, there are things you can do with the breath to reactivate ayahuasca, So there's also things you can do with breath to reconnect with your ceremony centeredness and empowerment and clarity, and parasympathetic, all of that. So with specific things like weight loss journeys or reducing inflammation, this is where duration does become a factor. In all cases, your body will tell you. If you just want to be a warrior about it and do it every morning, awesome. That's great when it's more about a physical benefit. However, with the dimensions of like mental health and more subtle areas and even a deep unexpected trauma release, a lot of impact can be had from exactly one session. So it does have a parallel with plant medicine, sacred plant medicine, in the sense that your body will begin this conversation with this new medicine, I'm referring to the medicine of the breath work as well, and the music. So all three of these elements, the breath, the music, and the ice, and also a certain sense of reconnection with ancestral wisdom. So you're getting different feedback from your body that you may not have perceived before or felt connected with before. So it's all about just listening to the body intimately after ceremony. I invite folks to avoid coffee, alcohol, weed, to change the channel of their integration. Integration is very important, just like they'll tell you after ayahuasca. And as you experienced with the dopamine wave, if you don't change the channel of your experience with those kind of interventions, you can ride that wave of clarity for days. It's subjective, the number of times, but I always invite folks to keep in touch with me personally, listen to their body. If I know someone has come before, there's different things we can explore in a second session. They can tell me how their integration process was, and I can tune in with their intention first time versus their intention this time and guide them better. You know, maybe the first time it's like, I'm just here because I'm curious. And the second time, I'm here exactly for this reason because this is what I felt after and I want to explore that more. You know, so even in one ceremony, first round, second round in the ice, you can choose a different song, you can bring a different intention. So letting me in on that conversation of your intention and how I can support you best is also an important part of helping people tune in to how much they need. And there are cases where I've said, like, you're overdoing it. You're getting addicted to dopamine.
So tell me a story of somebody who has had like such a transformative healing response from doing ceremony.
This is another beautiful question, and every time I think of this case, it moves me, as you can see. It happened in Tanzania. This past spring. It was a dear sister. Well, she's now a dear sister. I did not know her yet. So she came to ceremony, and during the breathwork introduction, she had locked eyes with me, not even blinking, it felt. And I was like, wow, I really feel this woman's presence. Like, she's fully here, respect. Didn't know anything of her story. After the breathwork, she was like, I want to go first in the ice. She was quiet before, and now she was just alive and motivated. And so she went first. It was a big group that day, mostly young folks, 10 others. And soon as she entered the ice, she immediately began having what is my profession and privilege to recognize as trauma release, and to immediately just shift into the mode of creating maximal safe space for her, turning up her music, connecting with her breathing, just letting her know. Because the vulnerability also intensifies in that moment. So the need to reinforce, not remind, but more reinforce the notion of safety and really create that container. I was literally holding the tub. I'd never done that before, but something about her energy coming toward me, it was like a kind of a hug situation with my arms around the tub. In any case, the others in the group didn't know what they were witnessing. It looks like rebirthing, laughing, screaming, crying, orgasming.
Everything.
Just a tsunami of seismic energy flowing back to source. And there were tears flowing down the cheeks of everyone in the group just witnessing this release. Zero story, zero knowledge. Very humbling, very inspiring for them, for all of us. And then in closing circle of that ceremony, she shared with us that some months back, her 1.5-year-old daughter had fallen in a pool and drowned to death. Totally heartbreaking story. And there was also this layer that it's because she wasn't looking, so she had all this shame around it and guilt. But her tone shifted. It was almost like she was going to say some good news of some kind. We didn't know where her share was going. We were just fully hearts connected to her willingness to check in and to share with us. She said that when she got in the ice and she just connected with me and her music, she said that she felt the grief thrust out of her body for the first time ever. And it was and she used that word, thrust, of just the grief evacuating her body.
Yeah.
And there was just, this is where we get on the threshold of, beyond the threshold of words to describe what it meant to hear her share that and how happy we were for her. And she took that video. This was very generous of her to share that reflection. And she took that video and she put it in our WhatsApp group and she put it on her Instagram. By the way, she's Kenyan. It was in TZ, but she's a Kenyan fashion designer. So her community is mostly here. And I say generous because she showed women in the community that there is a safe, non-mystical, non-privileged,
psychedelic,
non-flight-proof for ayahuasca, non-religious access to trauma release. And in the way she framed it in her post, it was also a celebration of release. And that was so generous of her because I learned from her about this cultural norm of women with trauma such as hers being kind of pushed low-key, pushed to deal with it, be strong, get over it. So I got a lot of PMs actually from Kenya because of her clientele. Kenya was never on my radar, but her friends were like, where is this? I need this. And we bump into each other in public a lot. And she'd be like, meet Nathan, he saved my life. But like, honestly, I've learned so much from her.
Yeah.
That was such a gift and a blessing to really, because wherever this practice goes, it's not just for privileged folks. It needs to have an organic relationship to the community. And from that day, I really learned about what Tanzanian women are carrying, especially around the topics of child loss and sexual abuse, and the really urgent importance to welcome the conversation about this practice as a safe space for trauma release, for mental health, and that shifted dramatically from that day. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much so. I'm like blown away. I'm taken back. You know, the other thing I was just thinking about was that, I always thought...
the frankincense spray.
I always look at, when it comes to the ice bath and all the research and all the studies that we have done and, all the Googling, it's all physicality, right? It's when somebody's diagnosed with an autoimmune, somebody's been diagnosed with some physical element in their body. And yes, ice is going to help you heal something like this, but something so traumatic as to losing a child and releasing that guilt, it's blowing me away. Just thinking, I'm completely shell-shocked about how that can be also a possibility. Because I've heard of all the physical possibilities of how ice can be beneficial, but this is something that's amazing. But at this point, the one thing that keeps popping up into my mind is, when it comes to doing these ice bath ceremonies, what about doing one for children?
Oh, I love working with kids.
I'd love to have my boys jump into an ice bath. They're 11. Is there like an age restriction?
No, there isn't an age restriction. The restriction is just their motivation.
Okay.
So at any age, if they feel called, I can work with them. Literally any age. There's been situations like at fairs where a parent was kind of pushing the child, and I was like, no.
Don't push him.
No. I was like, I had to tell them. I'd looked in the dad's eyes. I was like, I didn't want to make a discussion in front of her, disrespect him in front of his daughter. But he got the message from my eyes, do not push her. If she's called, it'll be a joy and a privilege.
My daughter's been asking me every time, why can't you do one for kids? Why can't you do an ice bath? And she's 6. She's like, I want to be in an ice bath. I want you to do an ice bath ceremony for kids. And I'm like, okay, I'll speak to Nathan.
It's fabulous. It's wonderful.
I think maybe we should try and plan one for January for sure.
Cool. With great pleasure and joy. And I can't wait to see what their song choices are.
I'd be very interested to see what their song choices are.
With kids, there's also a little bit more, what I've seen at the fairs, they gather around the tub and they support each other and they take cups of the water and pour it on each other's head. They have no hesitation to poke each other on the ice, put more ice, I'm putting ice in your ear, And there's just all this love and playfulness, because as you know from ceremony, there's a big element of inviting your inner child to connect with your music, inviting your inner child to dance in the breathwork, inviting your inner child to play in the ice. So when it's a literal child, they just like bring that joy.
They bring that joy.
And they have their own kind of nitni taigara bomb of the medicine of each other and supporting each other, which is just, it's gorgeous.
I'm excited for that one for sure now.
Yes.
I'm really
and they
excited.
go in the tub together, two at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, what advice would you give somebody who is listening to this podcast and is still not convinced and still a bit hesitant to to jump into a ice bath ceremony with you?
I'm referencing something I shared before. I would remind them that they're not walking off the street and jumping in the ice. That allow the possibility that the breath work will create a really meaningful shift for you, and you may feel completely at ease. A few days ago at your studio,
Okay.
there was a lady who came. She contributed the full price and said, "I'm only here for breath work."
Okay.
Like, okay, respect. And I just said, respectfully, I just want to invite you to be open to the possibility that after the breath work and after the community energy, the circle energy starts circulating, and there's a sense of like a multitude of we's arriving, transcending into a single we. Mm-hmm. And that's another subject which I'd love to address if we still have time, about the medicine of the community. And so I just invited her to trust the breath work and also the community to see if she feels different afterwards, see if she feels more at ease. And it was after everyone had taken their turn and we all thought that we were going to close the circle. And she was like, "No, I want to go."
And she went in?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
And she was glorious. She was a chillionaire.
Yeah.
Her breathing was calm the whole time. It's amazing. Another thing that inspired me so much in TZ with the women, I did a few team building sessions, which were like all Tanzanian staff. And these are, I know the establishments. I've observed how they work and everything. And I've seen that these are dynamics where the men are mostly like, I won't always say putting down, but the men are like clearly dominant and the women are not invited to voice themselves so much. So like that like kind of old school hierarchy is just there. It is what it is, you know. Generational thing even maybe. So in any case, the reason I mention this, because in those team building ice bath ceremonies, it was the men who were like tapped out after a minute, and it was the women who were just like radiant, expanding, smiling, just like glorious matriarchs in the ice. And the men witnessed this, and it was humbling for them. It was a great day. I was so happy for that like healthy inversion of their typical gender dynamics.
Well, how can people connect with you and participate in one of your ceremonies? Well, we know that they can reach out to me.
Yeah.
Come to the studio for a ceremony. But is there any other way?
Well, I use that app that I don't love, but it's the world we deal with, Instagram.
Yeah.
Long exhales on Instagram, all one word.
I will put it in the captions for sure.
Okay, cheers. And Karibuni Sana in our WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
It's mostly people who've done ceremony as well, but it's also for curious folks, and it's designed to be a safe space, also where people share their experience more, share some photos or videos of their experience. And you never know when you read someone's story how it resonates with you. Like maybe you read someone who overcame something that you have been struggling with, and I really encourage people to use the WhatsApp group in a way to connect with community in a way that, you know, is of service to them as well. Also on Mondays, it's a community board. So if you've shared your experience once, I say you can share your small business. This is my fashion line. This is my new podcast, whatever. Okay. So I aim for the group to also be of service to the community in lateral ways, not just like building. I love building community, not just building like, you know, the topic of breathwork and ice baths. So it's a fun place. It's a vibe. There's no spam. So anyone can pop in. And yeah, I'm not a nomad. I love Kenya. I want to ground and plant roots and meet my queen, inshallah. But I do travel with it. Morocco is a second home, and I'm happy to go anywhere to be of service. The people keep saying lately, "We got to come to Dubai. We got to bring you to Dubai." I was like, never thought about Dubai, but it seems to be like somehow calling. But I promise if I go, I'll come back.
A message you'd like to leave our listeners with?
It may sound like hippie or cliche. Allow the magic of community to reach you in a special way. Because there's a big difference when people insist on a private session, it's just them, versus experiencing the circle and experiencing the container and experiencing how like the song someone chose moves you in a certain way, or the way you see someone overpower in the eyes tells you like, wow, I have to do it now, or I can do it now. Or the way someone says, instead of a song, I would like all of you to come close and just breathe slowly with me, or recite affirmations for me. Or someone after breath work says, wow, I was taken into a flashback of childhood sexual abuse and I feel able to talk about it now. And someone in the group also has that story and has never spoken about it.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many...
The power of community, yeah?
Yeah, there's so many precious, inherent potential magics in every circle. So every time we circle up, for me, it's a celebration of community. It's a temporary utopia.
Yeah.
So I really give thanks for the circle, every single circle. And as you know from feedback you've seen, people point that out a lot. It was like the community who gave me the power that I thought I didn't have.
Exactly.
And they leave as like, 11 new friends.
Exactly.
So I'm like, oh, I don't want to come to ceremony because I don't know anybody. I'm like, you're going to leave with new brothers and sisters, I promise you.
Totally.
So giving thanks for that so much. And again, giving thanks for the safe space and intimacy, which is like inherent and beyond body. Just when people walk in, people are way ahead of the curve to do meaningful healing work and release through the energy of your space. So thank you again for your brilliant service to the community. And the other thing I could share more in short, you are beautiful, you are powerful, you are free, and you are the medicine. And I know that may also sound cliche, but it's very real. And the reason is because if you connect with what that means, you cannot be in a state of fear. Mm-hmm. And if you cannot be in a state of fear, vibrationally, you are expelling disease from your body, as you well know, and are a huge, huge inspiration of being. So I'm preaching to the choir. And you,
no, you're not.
Yeah, I would love the privilege of listening to you on this topic. But also, I mean, look at the world we live in. In recent years, people on a very large scale were manipulated into fear.
Yes.
And when you are in a vibration of fear, this is where humans are most manipulatable.
Exactly.
And it is sad how many sisters I know who tell me I was manipulated to get those COVID shots because my job or whatever, and like now my cycle's been screwed up ever since, or we can't conceive a baby. It's a fact that miscarriage rates are skyrocketed since March 2021 when that stuff came out. So unfortunately, the world is a challenging place, and there are numerous narratives and powerful things and structures we which deal with, and they ultimately have the effect of disempowering people, of thinking our wellness is outsourced to something Bill Gates says, or to some chemical or pill or some hospital or whatever. But coming back to reconnecting with the profound healing power of your body, of your ancestral wisdom, of your own breath, it's just so important to avoid fear and live in self-love and gratitude for the power of your body, for your breath. And this is why my mantra at the end of every ceremony is those words. With no disrespect, I mean, my mom's husband is an ER doc, super dogmatic, allopathic meds and vaccines and everything. Like, I grew up on that. I love this man. We're cool. I've got friends on every side of every discussion.
Has to make their own choices.
Yes,
right?
and thank you. Choices. Mm-hmm. So there have been so many situations which I've heard from directly here and in other places where like I wasn't given a choice about that injection. Yes. I was told if I wanted to say goodbye to grandma in the hospital, I had to get that injection. I was told to keep my job, I had to get that injection. Yes, choice is so important for everyone's body, and just not living in fear, and I just pray for everyone to know how much incredible wisdom, that we are all born with an immune system. We're blessed with an immune system, and they work perfectly fine.
Exactly.
If you just provided the conditions to do its magic, as you were divinely created. Hydrate, avoid the toxic oils and the fried food and all the sugar and all,
Yeah, my favorite saying in the world is genetic loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger.
That is an exact quote of my essential oils teacher.
Yeah.
Who I told you about earlier.
Yeah.
That you guys have to meet. I think you're soul sisters.
It must be.
She says that all the time.
Yeah. That's what it is your environment is going to pull the trigger.
Bless.
So we're going to end on that high note. Thank you so much, Nathan, for all your wise words. today.
This is the first time I've ever done a proper interview with cameras and mics and everything. So
Well, I'm happy it was with me.
Thank you for letting it flow.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for the joy and the privilege. Keep going. Keep
Yes,
shining your
you
magic.
too.
Yes.
Same as.
Yes.
Thank you.
Peace.